Thank you for inviting me to join you this morning. I'm going to share my impressions of the forces that govern people when they step into this space as an activist. I'm going to talk really about my own experience over the last couple of years. And I always feel really awkward talking about myself. That's not something I find particularly comfortable. But I think the XR and its sister movements represent such a broad spectrum of people, and such a such a sort of series of intersecting issues. I think it's really difficult to talk about the movement as a whole, and I think probably one of the best ways in is to sort of approach it through an individual lens. So forgive me for talking through some of the things that I've done. So beyond the obvious conviction in what people that people have and what they do, I think there's a huge extent to which we inspire each other to do things that we might not have been brave enough to ever think that we could do. I grew up in a forces family. I was a girl guide and a straight A student. So I grew up in this environment of rules and conformity, and that being a really important part of how you got on in life and how you did the right thing. So, but then I've had this massive cultural education through working in theatre over the last 20 years. And really these two things are now create this tension in me between my upbringing saying you've got to always follow the rules and do what you're told, and my cultural education telling me that I have to stand up for what I know is right, so that I have to resist oppression and put my voice and body on the line for the things that I know to be true. So my XR journey started at the beginning of 2020 with the usual things that I think people find easy to engage with: marches, rallies, local campaigns, and supporting other people who were taking action. One of the things I did early in that, was sort of in the middle of that year really, was organise the XR Bristol Families activities as part of the uprising in Bristol in August. And I did that with a lovely rebel called Darcy, who's a father of 3. And after we finished all of those actions in Bristol, I packed up and went back to whatever else I was supposed to be doing. And he picked up his stuff and went to London and joined the main rebellion at the beginning of September 20. And he did this extraordinary thing and almost sort of impromptu climbed onto the entrance hall of the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy building. And he spray painted the wall with a message that said 4 degrees is mass murder. And he just stood there and held forth until he was, I think he glued himself on, stood there and held forth until he was arrested and taken down. And just his mastery of what's going on and the situation politically and environmentally was completely inspiring. And although I hadn't been intending to go to London, really it pushed me into action. It pushed me to think, well, hang on a minute, all this sort of organising and stuff isn't really enough. Maybe I need to go and sort of actually be in the mainstream of people who are really taking action and making commitments. So I was invited to join an action by lovely Kay from CDE. And she told me about this action and I thought, well, that sounds amazing, but certainly no way I'm brave enough to do it. And I joined the Zoom action for this, the Zoom meeting for this action. And at that point was determined not to get myself arrested. But by the time I'd got to the end of this Zoom call, I knew I was fairly deep in. And this is what we did. We went to Parliament early in the morning, and the women that are standing up are de-locked around their neck to the railings. And then obviously there are some of us sat down. And we stayed there until we were arrested. And I really did know at that point that there was no way, once I was standing with those women, that I was going to walk away and leave them. So that was my first experience of being arrested. I moved pretty quickly from I'm definitely not getting arrested to, oh, I'm here and that's what's happening. One of the women that I met on that action is this amazing woman, Dr. Sarah Benn. She's a GP, she's a mother of 3. She's been a GP for 32 years. And this is her earlier this month, she was arrested for being part of a Just Stop Oil action, and then instead of attending court, she went and broke an injunction that was placed on the roads around the oil refinery. And so she was held on remand in prison for 8 days. And the women that she was held with, they all started a program of non-compliance, which I'll talk about a bit more later. But, you know, these are ordinary people. These are pillars of the community. These are people that we know who are putting themselves in this extraordinary position. So my second action was this one in August 21, having been too frightened to, I've been really in awe of the women that were delocking in my first action. This was my first experience of glue. So this is a women's action, that's Oxford Circus, and there's a chain of women who are glued together around women who are locked onto a structure in the centre. And this action was amazing because it introduced me to two incredible people. This is Emma Smart. She's, I'm sure lots of people will know her name. She's an ecologist, and she's one of the Insulate Britain 9 who spent Christmas in prison. This was her being arrested again outside the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy building last month. And she, you know, again, is an ordinary person, pillar of the community, and she has become this completely inspiring activist. She also refused to attend court. So again, this non-compliance that we're seeing that I'll talk a bit more about. So there are people like Emma and Sarah who are, you know, grown-ups way into their careers and their lives. There are also people like Ams Halls here, who is in her very early 20s and is a committed activist. The amazing thing about the people I've met through this movement are this brilliant flame of rage in the youth movement. You know, there is this real sense of injustice and what we can do, and practicalities, and doing stuff that comes from the older activists that I know. But the rage, the incandescent rage of the people in the youth movement, I just find completely inspiring and extremely moving. These people who know that this is what their lives are going to be like, and are thoroughly committed to doing everything they can about it. My third action here in November 21 was in solidarity with the IB9, who had just been at that point imprisoned. 130 of us broke the injunction that had been put on all major highways in the country. And that was previously I'd done these very sort of safe, secure women's actions. This felt quite different, quite scary to do. So there's this sort of story of escalation that's happening, inspired by these amazing people who are taking action. This is Peter Kalmus. He's a climate scientist who tweets as Climate Human, who gave an extraordinarily emotional speech. I think this is in Washington, just begging for the scientists to be heard. His action of locking on, I think, really inspired me to do that. This is outside the Lloyd's of London building in April. The three of us are chained on to that door. Amazingly, that action has resulted in 2 insurers withdrawing from the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is the controversial pipeline in Canada that's going through Indigenous lands. This was at Shell. Again, we glued on, and this action seems to have directly inspired one of Shell's freelance safety consultants to very publicly resign from Shell this week. And then I hope everyone saw the amazing action at the Shell AGM yesterday, which was forced to disband. And then this was the most recent arrest that at the end of the April rebellion. I was locked on in a lock-on tube inside the car, which is the first time I've done that. That again felt like quite a sort of escalation. But the thing that really I hold in my mind is Millicent Fawcett's quote, "Courage calls to courage everywhere." And as you continue to see people taking action, it just feels like we're being called to do more and to step in. It has been really, really hard to get arrested. The police are clearly not very willing to do it. So there is this definite change, despite the fact that this act is coming in, where the police just do not want to lift people off the streets. They do not want to put people into the system. And so I think people are therefore having to step even further than they thought they would. And this is, I think this is the last slide I'll share with you for now. This is Michelle Charlesworth. She's a 55-year-old grandmother who's been arrested through Just Stop Oil protests. And she is, the other activists that she was arrested with have been released from remand. But because of the programme of non-compliance that Michelle is now engaged in prison, she's been held for an extra 33 days. And she says this: "My courage is not wavering, and I'm here to do a job. Inmates are curious and want to know more. It's interesting how little officers and inmates seem to know or understand about the existential crisis we're in. Everyone is looking at us and wondering why we would go to such lengths. There is much work to do, sharing the message and showing this part of society what we are all about. Courage, love, solidarity, non-violent resistance. The disruptions we've caused have impacted our wing. However, the message is being filtered back through the prison grapevine is that there is respect for what we're doing." So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see more ordinary people like this, who are demonstrably not criminals, going to prison, either for short sections of remand stay because they are engaged in non-compliance, or because they are going to court, they're being found guilty, you know, even whether it's through civil or criminal channels, which the government is now having to use both of those, and to serve time. I'm not there yet. I'm not, but I know that I will be. I can see that is what is going to happen. That I will at some point inevitably go to prison because of the laws that are coming in and because of what we're all being called to do. And I think what's probably notable through the pictures that I've shared is the total lack of diversity in these actions. And that is because non-violent civil disobedience is not a safe space for people of colour or trans activists. And I've really struggled with that. You know, what's the value of my activism if it comes from this place of privilege? But I now recognise that my job, my duty, my responsibility is to put my middle class, middle-aged white body on the line because I can. Because there's less risk for me. So I don't think that these laws are going to deter people. I think people will step up and will take the consequences of it. And that means all of us, basically. So I think I'll leave that there and hand over to Dan.
Thank you very, very much for that, Chloe. Really moving. I must admit that so far I've never put myself up as being arrestable, but I think, as you're saying, that it is going to become inevitable with these changes that are going through. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't that long ago that Boris Johnson actually said that he would lie down in front of the bulldozers at Heathrow Airport. And now he wants to give us a year in jail for doing something similar to that. But to me, I feel the work that I've done with Heather over the last 30 years has increasingly moved in a way of visual art towards protest and towards making statements and trying to change things through a creativity. And I think that's one thing I felt with XR is that drew me straight to it was just the graphics and the quality and the visual situations that they set up, whether it's the iconic pink boat in Oxford Circus or trying to bury the coffin in the middle of Parliament Square and then ending up with the police protecting the land around where they were trying to place the coffin, but just the whole theatricality and creativity within that. And in groups like Ocean Rebellion, some of the situations that they set up, and those images are all images that do go globally out there. So I think through a creativity and a way of acting, I was going to share a screen, but I figured what I'd do actually is just put a few websites and things into the chat level. I think just the way protest has to evolve, especially when the rules and the laws become more draconian. I mean, I think there was a Labour MP saying to Patel that the laws are actually worse than they are in Putin's Russia. And that's where we're going, and that is very disturbing. But I don't think it's going to stop the likes of us. I really don't. I think the more you push against something, the more there's going to be a pushback. And I think, as you were saying, Chloe, I think that there will be more and more people arrested, and I think there'll be more and more people who perhaps have high profile within the arts, within the musics, within writing, that will be stepping up and saying enough is enough. Patel was saying that we can't be seen to be ruled by mob rule, but they are the mob who are actually forcing us into a situation that we can't do anything other than that. So I think there'll be, it's so hard to know which way things will go, but I think that events like what happened at the Shell AGM yesterday, when it was infiltrated by people, what happened at the Conservative spring dinner with the activists against the refugees, people being deported, I think those things are going to happen more and more too. I mean, how you can try and silence people by saying that a demonstration is too noisy or it's causing a nuisance. I mean, as we know, these are phrases that you can't quantify that. Who's making that decision? You're being too noisy. That's trying to silence us completely. So I think we've all got to pull together in different ways, and whether that's through being arrested, whether it's through noisy demonstrations, or whether it's through creativity in making artworks. I think all that needs to come together. The Writers' Rebel, which is the literary arm of Extinction Rebellion that Gabby was involved in on one of the projects there. Paint the Land project the website has just been launched, and it says some amazing work that has gone into that. There was a piece that Heather and I did that we actually grew inside the Tate Modern. Whilst it was in the Tate Modern, it was a collaboration between ourselves and the writer Ben Oakrey, nothing to do with Extinction Rebellion or Writers' Rebel, but with permission of Francis Morris there, as soon as it left the building, it became an action. It was Writers' Rebel and Extinction Rebellion. We carried this huge grass carpet that was imprinted with the words from Ben Oakrey, and we took it down and it was floated on the Thames. There were speeches, and Damon Albarn came and sang a song with Ben Oakrey's little daughter and a choir. I mean, it was a very moving event. But what I'll do is I'm going to just put a series of websites in the chat. There's one also, just something else that I've been involved with XR from Milan. They're doing a series of exhibitions that are posters, that they're getting artists to send posters in that are open source so they can be printed out. I know that they had an exhibition in Milan. I know that the posters were also up at Glasgow COP event. So there are different things that are happening. And I think we just all have to stay as positive as we can and do as much as we can and use our creativity. Thank you. I'll put some things in chat now.
Thank you very much, Dan and Chloe. That was really, really moving. So thank you very much. And now we just go, open up the chat. Any questions for Chloe or Dan, or sort of thoughts people have had come up during all of that? Would be great.
Sorry, let me just do this.
Deborah. Hi, Kate.
I actually just typed something in the chat, but maybe I'll read it instead. I wrote, "We need the mainstream. Culture is still defined by privilege in this space. I'm a council estate kid who embraced the privilege of the champagne, always a weird drink, never really liked it, in the visual arts, whilst feeling like an imposter. I fit in neither camp, but I'm increasingly with the common people, the aesthetic bad taste, the football chants and the crude thinking. There's a space for an accessible mass action that's the scale of comic relief, and as accessible as that campaign. This must be positive, but underpinned by the science. If you want change, throw a better party. That's what I'm working on. I see all the kind of complexity of where we are and my journey and you know how much of a snob I was when I was a kid, like a little secret, quiet little introvert bookie, kind of like I was born in the wrong family. This is not my family, and I know that in that the journey of my life, I've spent time with so many outsiders who are trying to work out where they fit and how they work in this increasingly unhealthy world. Obviously unhealthy world. We've been in a healthy world for a long time, and I value every human on this call. I have really loved my journey with Culture Declares over the last 2 years. I also get increasingly frustrated that we don't have a space like this for other voices to enter. And yeah, we need something that can pull in all the different kinds of movements and the different kinds of networks, and the ones that we find less comfortable to be with are the ones that we need to be with. Anyway, that's my contribution.
Thanks. And Pippa, I think you said you had did you have maybe not Pippa, sorry, I thought you had your hand up. If not, something that I was thinking, I mentioned it briefly earlier, I know it's a bit of a silly way of looking at it, but I was looking at the Wikipedia page for the police crime bill, and it was really interesting how it was kind of framed on there, and obviously it's written by whoever, you know, anyone can write a Wikipedia page, but they gave the background very clearly to the bill as being about XR and being about Insulate Britain and about being the pulling down of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol, and it was very clearly like this is the reason this bill was brought in. And then they had some stats on there from various YouGov polls about how the public, the people being polled, were opposed to, you know, very critical of things like some of the more disruptive actions XR have done, things like the Edward Colston statue. And I just thought it was really interesting that on the Wikipedia page, they didn't quite go as far as saying, you know, here are some stats, this proves that the public support this bill, but that was what it was implying, which I don't think it does at all. I think just because people, you know, don't like the fact that XR disrupted their tube one day means that they would support this bill. But the way it was portrayed on that page, and I wonder if this is how the government has been justifying itself as well, is by saying there's a direct link between people who are a bit annoyed about what XR or whoever have been up to, or we don't like seeing the Edward Colston pictures because it looks a bit violent on our TV, to this jump of now we need all this really quite scary legislation. And I wonder if that's a bit of a worrying kind of logic that's being made there. Pippa, sorry.
I think that's a really interesting point, Laura. But before I answer that, I just want to thank Chloe. I really respect you putting your body, white middle class body on the line. That's absolutely awesome. My grandmother was one of the Committee of 100, Bertrand Russell's, and she went to jail in the 60s, and of course was at Greenham Common. Loads of women went to jail. There's a really long, fabulous tradition of that. So good on you. I'm with you in spirit. And I think there's something else I just wanted to say, a reflection on that, and it's partly out of this conversation I had today, which is also to be doing all the appropriate processes. I think there's something really, really valuable about going, we're going to go out there and we're going to protest and we're going to get, you know, arrested or whatever, but we're also going to write to the board. We're also going to follow all these, you know, that we are really frustrating bureaucratic nonsense, but actually when you look then at the whole thing, you're able to say, well, we tried all those routes and actually we weren't getting the responses that we wanted. Yeah, I think there's something very valuable in that. And it may not be you, but I think in terms of the groups, of just being able to notice how much we take these big actions, because in response to you, Laura, I think actually it's a sign of desperation in a way. It's a sign of going, actually, this is kind of getting out of our control, because I noticed that Jay Jordan's in one of Dan's links. And, you know, for those of us who were there for Reclaim the Streets, the police kicked off all the time, but they didn't feel the need to do this. So yeah, I just think this sort of shifting milieu of like, how do we hold various lines of response to it and stay on the right side of law as well as on the wrong. Anyway, they're my thoughts.
Yeah, Chloe.
Yeah, two things picking up on what Pippa's just said. Firstly, I suppose we all those of us who are women or identify as women, we all owe so much to the suffragettes who, you know, went to prison, were force-fed. You know, that was a normalised part of fighting for that transparently important, crucial human right of being able to vote. That this is our fight. That was theirs. This one is ours. And I think, you know, it's very easy being liberal now because all of the messy work of fighting for the things that we hold dear, the right to vote, the right to marry whoever you want, you know, civil rights, equality, all of that's been done. It's been done by other people. And we, I think, as sort of left or liberal people, however we define ourselves, we have to step up on this one because we've benefited from all the stepping up that other people did for us about all the other things that we hold important, and this one is absolutely crucial. And I think, you know, I personally find it incredibly moving and very inspiring to feel like I'm stepping into the shoes of those amazing women who put themselves to such extraordinary lengths in order to get me what I take for granted now. And the other thing I was going to say is that public opinion is not a fixed thing. It is a continually moving, live organism. And every single rebellion, I have made a point of doing some outreach. I mean, Gabby is the absolute master of doing outreach. She's absolutely brilliant. So she's probably got a better impression on this even than I have. But when you talk to people at rebellions, you get a real sense of, you get a sort of impression of what people are thinking. And the number of people who sort of storm past going, oh, you bloody idiots, waste of time, get a job, that number is decreasing really, really significantly. And the number of people who go, oh, actually, yeah, I've heard about this, or maybe I should get involved, or I've been thinking about, yeah, I'm really worried about this, actually, who do I talk to about this? That group of people is huge. And we know from polling that this is the top concern for people in this country. You know, it's something like 84% of people in this country are really concerned about the environment and climate change. So whatever the government are quoting to drive forward this law, it's not current. It's not current, and it is continuing to change, and it's changing all the time.
And I would say on that, those stats are also not that new now. You know, they're at least, you know, they're at least 2 or 3 years old. So I think you're right that there is, you know, it doesn't reflect the current changes that might be happening in public opinion. Kate, sorry, you've got your hand raised.
Thanks. Well, unmute. Thanks. Just wanted to respond to Chloe that this is our fight. I agree. But I think it's important that we keep the focus where it should be. This is because there are so many battles going on, because this is a fundamental existential series of crises that are all coming together. So I find there's so much distraction that keeping the green spectacles on, so everything is seen through green spectacles, makes it easier for me to focus on what I see as the crucial thing. The other thing I wanted to say was, I'm very sorry I'm so late to this meeting. I have a house guest, and Ben couldn't get in. But I don't know whether you've picked up on the 0 hours tabling. They're launching this nature and climate declaration, and they want us all to write to keep the pressure up to local councillors who may have just got in through the May elections to make this declaration, which is this climate and ecology bill light. So at government level, if we can keep this pressure going, they've got 800 signatories and they need signatures, and they just want as many as they can, so that puts pressure on the MPs, because we've still only got 120 MPs. Thanks. Who did that? Thank you.
I was going to bring up, I thought it's quite a nice one because it's like a good new, it's sort of a positive way out of this. Is the government legislation can be against us, but also yes, there are good politicians out there, and we can lobby and use the same mechanisms to try and go the other way. Exactly.
I talked to my MP. She put through this banning plastics in wet wipes, and it's such a long-winded process to do it through Parliament. If Parliament had this climate and ecology bill in place, maybe we would be able to fast track all these sort of decisions, because it just shouldn't even have to be debated. That should be it should be already clear that that wet wipes should either not exist, or they shouldn't have plastics in them, because they're killing our sea life. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. We'll do it.
Thanks, Kate. Sort of slightly following on from that, one thing, maybe Chloe, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, is sometimes people worry, or well, maybe I worry, that the challenges to protest mean that becomes the story rather than the climate change becoming the story, which is what Kate was just saying. And whether, I was thinking about people who, XR rebels who are in court, who do these powerful speeches about climate emergency, and it moves the people in the court, including the judges. And is there a risk that gets derailed, because now their fight, first of all, becomes about whether you're right to protest and whether why you're in the court in the first place?
Yeah, I suppose that is a risk, and I think what we've been seeing is that the impact of rebels talking to juries has been so effective that the courts are increasingly keen to not let that happen, basically. So all of the Insulate Britain stuff was they were prosecuted in the civil court, so there wasn't ever a jury. So they're relying on an individual judge to make a decision. And I think that's also part of this reluctance that the police seem to have to be arresting people at the moment. I think it's all about going, you're using this as a platform, so we're going to try and take the platform away. So I'm not sure that's quite an answer, but that's my impression about what's going on at the moment.
Gabby.
Yeah, so the idea of the police taking the platform away, it's also the press taking the platform away. This morning on Radio 4's Today programme, they talked about the Shell AGM, and they talked about a reduction in the number of people voting for some climate actions by Shell, and yet didn't mention the fact that the AGM was held up for hours by people protesting at the meeting. It was like, we're going to ignore these naughty children somehow. There's such a story behind these naughty children. There's so much that bolsters what we're all doing, what the stories that we're trying to get out there. And absolutely the speeches of people in the juries, those speeches need to get out, to be heard, because they are incredibly powerful. And I guess it's this idea of alternative media how we, you know, how do people hear the truth? You know, I mean, it's and yeah, following on from what someone else is saying, how we use those kind of more recognized platforms as well. So, you know, the Good Law Project, amazing. Stop Ecocide, amazing. And they have the gravitas of the lawyers there, and we need to kind of be feeding off each other to both get the credibility, I think, of you know, at all the different levels and dimensions of action. But yeah, God, so good to be here, so good to be part of a community of like-minded people, and that's what we need to keep building. We need to keep reaching out. So thank you, everyone.
Oh, Pippa.
I was at an action last week just to notice that there are also fantastic other ways in which the actions can have impact, which I'm sure, you know, you're all across, but we were protesting. It was a small number, all dressed in red and black, big band just outside a hotel because Venture Minerals, who are mining in the Tarkine, which is pristine rainforest in Tasmania, they want to put a new slag heap in. Anyway, awful things. But it was the most successful that this group had ever done before, and the share price went down substantially, like 5% or something. So that also, that brilliant thing about how do we notice those stories, because of course the press are never going to tell those stories really. Well, they sort of do, but not in the way of connecting it to action that is connecting it to, you know, trying to save a forest. Certainly in Australia, that wouldn't happen. So I'm kind of interested in that. And then the other point, which I know we come to every time, and Deborah's kind of alluding to, is that the story of what it looks like next. Because I agree with Chloe 100% that there are so many people kind of wanting something, but they don't know. They know what protest looks like. They know what the resistance looks like. They don't know what the next thing, the transition, looks like. And we really, that's our job. That's the art's job. We need to work on that.
Yeah, it's that kind of revaluing, reanalyzing what we value, and how to hold that precious and safe, and take it into our future.
We are pretty much at 10 o'clock anyway. So Victoria, over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just coming back to this, the idea about, you know, difference and identity politics, and the politics of coalition and collaboration. And I think it's that bit that we need to focus on. The whole, you know, Deborah was talking about, you know, our privilege and, you know, supporting the understanding of, you know, people with other cultures who, you know, that bottom up thing, but it's seeing the points of coalition, that, you know, the causes of the earth crisis are the same causes of, you know, people's cost of living crisis. And it's that, how we communicate that, and how we come together and resist this sort of fracturing of narratives and division, which is, you know, perpetuated through culture wars and disinformation wars, I think. And there's a, you know, you've probably read her, Emma Dabiri, who's just, you know, inspirational, talking about this sort of thing. She is a Black academic with Irish roots, who is really sort of pushing back against sort of identity politics and, you know, unhelpful kind of theories around racism. That's it. I've got the book.
That's great, thank you, Victoria. So yes, I think I need to dash anyway, so I think might wrap up there if that's okay with everyone. But thank you for all your thoughts, and especially thank you to Dan. That was great, and thank you for coming. And there's been quite a few links and things shared, so I'll at some point pull those all together and send them out in an email to everyone who came today. So if you've missed any, they'll be there for you. Great, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thanks, everyone.